from Studio 67 in Florida's Capital County. It's time to be FACish.
Access granted.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode, Week 7 of FACish here in Studio 67 in Capital City, Tallahassee. This is Jeff Scala with the Florida Association of Counties Public Policy team. I'm joined by the FAC team, Bob, Eddie, and our analysts.
How's everyone today? So happy to be done with Week 7.
We've made it through Week 7. Still no budget conference, but bills are dying and things are heading to the floor. What do you think, Eddie?
It's go time.
Right, we're coming down here to the wire, and we're coming into the final stretch of session. Of course, we're past some significant deadlines of, committees are finishing up and wrapping up their work, and we're into past the 45th day deadline, so we're in that 24-hour notice period for House committees, so we'll be watching to see what is on the agenda for Monday and what's not on the agenda and stuck in committee. And as always, we always start with a question of the week, and this week, Bob, the question is, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, as we probably talked about before, Bob stands for birds or baseball. And so, in this instance, I wanted to be a baseball player.
Well, that's good you didn't want to be a bird. Baseball, what position's that, Bob? Were you have been the first base, pitcher, outfielder?
Outfielder. Nothing was more fun to me than putting on the gas and running as far as you can, reaching out and catching that ball.
Well, we know you had a long minor league baseball career, but we won't get to that today. Eddie.
That is a myth that I've created.
Eddie, how about you?
Well, I had two things that I wanted to do when I was a kid. First, I wanted to be an Olympian in judo. Kind of got close, but no cigar.
Black belt.
I have my black belt, but not an Olympian. Although I did win national championships. And I did so as a junior and as a young adult.
So you lived up to it.
And I've got the trophies and medals to prove it. On a professional level, what I wanted to be was a police officer. And I also I actually got accepted into the academy in 1982 for the city of Miami Beach. But because of circumstances and the fact that I wanted to finish my first semester as a junior in FIU, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had to, at the time that I had to report to the academy, destiny took over, and I ended up staying in school, not reporting to the academy, and later on becoming a lawyer.
Not quite law enforcement, but dealing with the law in another way.
Yes, our supreme legal eagle. And for me, I feel like I'm living the dream kind of here today. I wanted to be a newsman, but more specifically, broadcaster. I wanted to be the funny man. I wanted to be Jon Stewart and deliver some humor into the news. But to hear and being on the FAC podcast, I feel like I'm living the dream here today. What do you think, Bob? Living up my dream?
I think you're still young enough that dream could come true, especially with these podcasts on your resume.
Shiloh, when you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a dancer, so I wanted to go to Juilliard.
That's a good answer.
That's a good answer.
How about you, Jared?
Well, growing up, I was really into Yu-Gi-Oh, Jeff, and there are several assignments from back when I was in 2nd, 3rd grade where I wrote that I wanted to work in a Yu-Gi-Oh factory when I grew up. Now, somewhere along the way, I realized that's probably a sweatshop. and so I changed my answer to doctor based on that.
So kind of like a Pokemaster, you wanted to be the very best.
I wanted to be the
Bob
best.
might not understand that one, but it's all right. And last but not least, Sarah, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I wish I had a more fun answer for this question, but I genuinely think I wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger. I'm pretty positive.
It was destiny.
It was.
It was. Or a politician. It might have been that at a young age.
Oh, that's not as
Which
that's
is
not
weird.
as good of an answer. But it'll
I don't
work.
know why my mind thought that was a good idea, but
I think I can hear Senator Sarah.
in the making.
Senator Henley.
Ooh.
All right, we've got a lot to get through, so let's get to it. Sarah, do you know what time it is?
It is rundown time.
It's about to go down.
All right, so we had a lot of bills up this week. Starting out, we had House Bill 569, Local Business Protection by Representative McClure. We've been following these bills pretty closely this session. It was heard in its last committee, House Judiciary, on Wednesday, and it passed 13-7, and it has been placed on second reading. The Senate companion, SB 620, passed on the House floor in late January, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. HB 1555, private property rights to prune, trim, and remove trees by Rep. McLean, and its Senate companion SB 518 by Senator Broder, passed in their last committee stops, both unanimously. FAC was in support of both of those, and they were placed on second reading, and the Senate was placed on the special order calendar for March 1st, and SB 1380 and HB 219, the Real Property Rights by Senator Rodriguez and Representative Tuck. The House was heard in its last committee stop, House Judiciary, and passed unanimously, while the Senate version passed unanimously on the Senate floor this week. And both of these Surfside bills were heard this week. HB 7069 was heard on the House floor and passed unanimously, and the Senate companion SB 1702, mandatory building inspections by Senator Bradley, passed unanimously in its Senate Rules Committee this week. So that will be placed on special second reading. That's it for me.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, a couple things on that rundown. Probably the most significant of the bills is House Bill 569. That's a companion to Senate Bill 620, the one dealing with the potential for damages, business damages, the enactment of the local ordinance. That one is now prepared on the Senate floor and matched up to the Senate Bill 620. On the other big issue, 280 and 403, 403 has still not been heard.
That's right.
In its final committee.
We're waiting to see if that'll be on an agenda on Monday.
Yes. And just another comment, a bill we actually support was in that rundown with respect to the smoking bill.
The Butts Off the Beach bill, giving local governments the ability to ban smoking in parks and beaches.
Yes, and I'll get to chew on that if I have a cigar. And cigars are still allowed on beaches.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And just so that our friends out there know that on Senate Bill 518 and House Bill 1555, we did, since those bills kind of walked back a little bit on the current preemption on tree trimming, we did actually put in cards in support of those bills. And if you want to know a little bit more about what the bills do, please refer to Ledge Bill that's coming out today, and you can read up.
Yeah, and Bob, it wasn't just one, it was two preemption walkbacks from Tallahassee, so be sure to check those out.
That's the start of a good trend, Butto.
Moving right along, Jared, our second analyst, do you know what time it is?
Oh, it's rundown time.
It's about
In the world of finance and tax, House Joint Resolution HJR 1 and its implementing bill 1563 passed on the floor on Thursday. This is obviously a bill that's been pretty important to FAC throughout this process. Essentially, it would give an additional homestead tax exemption to certain members of the critical, what's considered the critical public sector workforce. The House version of the bill also expanded the list of eligible professions to include paramedics and EMTs with the recent amendment. So we will see how they reconcile that in the Senate. The New Look House tax package, HB 7071, passed appropriations the other day. FAC remains a little apprehensive about just one specific section of the package concerning tax abatements for catastrophic events. Essentially, the intent, as we see it, was kind of to provide relief for the little guy, if you will, homes that are destroyed in a fire or something like that. No one should have to, pay property taxes while they're not living in their home once it's rendered uninhabitable. Where we're getting concerned is essentially if a Cat 5 hurricane were to wipe out major metropolitan or suburban area, it could have just a horrific impact on the tax base. So we're hoping for some sort of fail-safe to trigger wherein the state might step in and kind of help offset that loss for the counties. In the world of tourism, Senate Bill 434 and House Bill 489, both on the tourism marketing program in Florida, were both TP'd, and both are hoping to get another shot on the floor next week. House Bill 777 on local tax referenda passed the House floor 111-2. This is a bill that FAC has been chipping away at for most of this session. It's a very well-intentioned bill that would essentially make sure that any tax referenda have to coincide with a general election. The idea being that you get better turnout, more people are aware of it at that point. But unfortunately, in the case of one specific tax, the millage, or what we see as the emergency millage, tax bills that have already gone out for that. And so, you might set a referenda for this. And it's, best case scenario, 14 months before you can actually address it. So that's something that we do have some concerns over. Shifting gears over to health and safety, House Bill 105 dealing with smoking regulations passed on the House floor. This is a nice little win for the counties. They took out some prior language that would have given the counties power to regulate smoking outside of businesses, in addition to what was already there with regards to smoking on beaches and parks under county and local jurisdiction. The Senate version was TP'd this week. Just one last thing to note, the language in these two bills is still ever so slightly different. The Senate version has a little carve out for cigars and pipes, while the House version only mentions cigars. So we will see how they reconcile that.
Thanks, Jared. Just a couple more things. House Bill 777, dealing with local tax referendum, passed off the floor of the House. And on the Senate side, its companion, Senate Bill 1144 by Senator Boyd, came out of the Appropriations Committee. We had awkward language on both sides to clarify that certain counties could still do a referendum at a special election. And basically, there's some emergency millage authorized in the Constitution, and this, as a practical matter, negates the ability to use it because the general election is too late to use it the year you need it. You can't schedule emergencies, but we could not get either the Senate or House sponsor to accept the language to this point. The bill's coming over to the Senate. It's still got to be heard on the Senate floor. And on the tax bill, when Jared mentioned it, I have a little post-traumatic stress disorder because I was the only person to speak against the House tax package in its final committee due to that open-ended liability for abatement.
We'll be monitoring the tax package as it comes in for a landing, as it gets bounced back and forth, late amendments on the floor. So, of course, stay tuned on that issue.
And Bob, just a little mention here. I think we should probably petition the legislature to provide for PTS benefits for lobbyists that have to deal with all the stuff that they put us through.
And that'll have to be a subject of a different bill.
Let's narrow it to lobbyists that can't make campaign contributions.
I agree with that.
2 rundowns down, 1 to go. Last analyst, Shiloh. Do you know what time it is?
It's rundown time.
About to go down.
All right, in the Senate, we had Senate Bill 1450, Healthy Food Financing Initiative Program by Senator Jones, which passed unanimously in the Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture, Environment, and General Government. FAC waved in support of the bill, and its companion passed last week. So we look forward to seeing what happens next week as they move along. In the Senate, we also had Senate Bill 1940, Statewide Flooding and Sea Level Rise Resilience by Senator Broder, which passed unanimously. The House companion, HB 7053, also passed unanimously this week in the the State Affairs Committee. And an amendment was adopted that expands the responsibilities of the Chief Resilience Officer to work with local government entities, and FAC waved in support of both bills. Then we had the PFAS bill, which is 1475, by Representative McClure, which passed unanimously in its last committee, State Affairs. FAC waved in support of the bill. An amendment was adopted that directs DEP to adopt statewide cleanup levels for PFAS in drinking water, groundwater, and soil using criteria only if the EPA does not finalize standards for PFAS in drinking water, groundwater, and soil by January 1st, 2025. And a comparable bill, Senate Bill 7012, is scheduled for its last committee stop on February 28th. And then last but not least, we have a couple updates on broadband. So that was Senate Bill 1800 by Senator Boyd, which passed unanimously. And an important amendment was adopted, which removed the application of $100 million in federal funding from the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund for the Broadband Pole Replacement Trust Fund, which is created by a linked bill, Senate Bill 1802, which also passed unanimously. And then we also had the amendment which removed $400 million for the Opportunity Grants Program.
Thank you, Shiloh. And on that last one, on the broadband bill, of course, we've been tracking those closely. It's important to note that with the funds coming out, it'll allow the Department of Economic Opportunities Office of Broadband to focus on the state strategic plan that will come due in June, and the state grant plan that'll be required to be submitted to the federal government by September. So at this point, we do have a broadband bill that will be heard in its last committee on Monday in the Senate. However, in the House, there is still one more committee stop, and it's unclear whether the Commerce Committee will meet again. So this bill might be meeting a slow fate of not being heard in all of its committees, but we'll stay tuned and be sure to track that as it goes. And on the other couple bills, one that we haven't talked before, it is on that food insecurity issue, and FAC had adopted a guiding principle to address those food deserts. So we're hoping to see those, they're identical bills, so we're hoping to see those cross the finish line here in the last 2 weeks. And on PFAS, that amendment, it did the two things. It moved the date back to 2025. So that's an additional, time for local governments not to receive those enforcement letters on the liability side. And it created this process by which either the EPA or DEP will make the rules, and if it's DEP, those rules will need to be ratified by the legislature. So PFAS, food insecurity, resiliency, broadband, everything there, a lot of issues moving forward.
Sounds great, Jeff. Let's hope they turn deserts into dessert.
Thanks, Bob. Always appreciate that feedback. All right, we've gotten through the rundowns. And of course, we're going to move into our biggest segment. Bob, are you ready for
One big thing?
All right, so one big thing in my area this week. At this point in the process, this is where things start popping up in bills. Something pops up in House Bill 963, dealing with child protective services by sheriffs. An amendment was put on that bill dealing with the sheriff's budget. It's designed to directly undo the recent Florida Supreme Court, Alachua v. Watson, which said that sheriffs have to come back to the county if they're going to move funds around at the object level. This bill goes even further. It says, notwithstanding any other law, sheriffs basically get to do whatever they want within their budgets. They can move it around at the functional level, which means with such things as court, law enforcement, and corrections. And then at the sub-object levels, they can move everything around. Where the Senate companion, Senate Bill 1452 by Senator Book, is up on consent agenda and appropriations, which in order to stay on consent, it cannot be amended. We are very much opposed to this change, as our system of checks and balances should be more than when we worry about the balance in our checkbook, or the sheriff worries about his balance in his checkbook.
Bob, does that mean that the sheriff brings a budget plan to the county commission negotiates with the sheriff, they approve the budget plan, but once it's approved, does that mean that the sheriff can just throw away the budget plan and set his own priorities?
I think that's absolutely the case. He could say in his budget plan he's going to spend it for one thing. He could move it into another after it's approved, and he can come back the next year and say, hey, guess what? I still need for that same first thing, with no transparency on what happened to the prior year appropriation.
Wow.
That's almost like our mic drop moment. That was one big thing. We've got more big things around here, though, this week. Eddie, what was happening this week for your
one big thing?
All right, Jeff, thanks. The one big thing for me this week was sovereign immunity. We had Senate Bill 974 was taken up in the Rules Committee, and it was substantially amended. As you recall, in Community Affairs, that bill was amended to provide for a $1 million, $3 million cap for sovereign immunity. So that means $1 million per person, $3 million per incident or occurrence. Well, the Senate redid itself in the Rules Committee by adopting a tiered approach for sovereign immunity. And the tiers are basically, there's three levels to the tiers. The first level involves counties and municipalities under 50,000 people. And also that tier applies to state universities, public colleges, subdivisions that are not within a county or municipality, and other entities that are covered by sovereign immunity but are also not within a county or municipality. And the cap for under that tier is current law caps. $200,000 per person and $300,000 per incident. The second tier involves counties and cities with populations between 50,000 and 250,000 persons, and that includes constitutional officers, and the cap is increased for those entities to a level of 3,000 per person and 400,000, or I should say 300,000 per person and 400,000 per incident. And then the biggest category of all is for those counties and cities that are, and that includes also the state and its agencies, For populations over 250,000, the caps are raised to the level of 400,000 per person and 600,000 per incident. So this is one of the arguments against this is that it violates equal protection, that somehow the lives of people or the injuries of people are worth less in a small area of the state as opposed to our larger urban centers because of the differentials in the caps. The other part of the bill is that if you have multiple sovereign entities that are liable for a particular incident, then the total liability of all the entities involved cannot exceed the amount for the entity with the highest liability limit. So that means that if you have take for example, a small county that's contiguous to a larger county, and an incident occurs where both entities are sued and are found liable by a jury, the liability for that smaller county would rise to the level of the larger county because they have the highest liability limit. So that's also in the bill. The bill also includes some of the statutory waivers for the statute of limitations and statute of repose for injuries due to a sexual battery. That's been kind of in the bills all the way through, and it is also included in this version that passed from the Rules Committee. The bill is effective October 1st, 2022, to coincide with the fiscal year for local governments, and the new limits would apply only to those claims that arise on or after that effective date. And that is it for me. Jeff, back to you.
Thanks, Eddie. And Bob, do you got anything to add there?
Nope. I will not. I'll be immune from the conversation on sovereign immunity. That is, I could not add anything to the great work that Eddie did.
Good answer. Deferring to Eddie.
Absolutely.
I do want to add one more thing because the House Bill 985 by Representative Beltran was on the Judiciary Committee agenda.
And what happened?
But before the committee meeting actually started, the chair announced that bill was temporarily postponed, even though Representative Beltran is a member of the Judiciary Committee and actually was sitting in committee while that announcement was being made. So that brings up an interesting issue. There is one more Judiciary Committee left. It's on Monday, and we'll have to see whether or not it makes the agenda on Sunday evening.
The good old day 45 rule, 24-hour notice period. We'll see if that makes it.
Well, let's hope temporarily postponed turns into permanently postponed. Oh, that was a great update. Eddie, how about you, Jeff? Don't you have...
I do, Bob. I've got one big thing, and it's not broadband this week, but it's another technology issue that we've been tracking all session long on cybersecurity. There is House Bill 7055, which is being introduced by both the State Administration Committee, but also Representative Gio Lombardo. This bill has a few different components, but really the overall goal here is to set up a state process for cybersecurity training and standards. So both state agencies and local governments will be required, with the Florida Digital Service, will develop a basic cybersecurity training curriculum for local government employees. All local government employees with access to the local government's network must complete the basic cybersecurity training within 30 days after commencing employment and annually thereafter. And local governments will also be required to adopt cybersecurity standards that safeguard its data, information technology, and information technology resources to ensure availability, confidentiality, and integrity. So it is a little open-ended here on what the standards are. They're going to be needing to be in compliance with the NIST cybersecurity framework. And in these standards, there's some reporting summaries for when a local government has a cybersecurity incident or a ransomware incident. So the bill creates a 5-tiered level of severity for incident reporting, with local governments and state agencies being needed to report a summary of facts, date of the most recent backup of their data, what type of data was compromised in the incident, the potential estimated impact, if it is ransomware, how much they paid in a ransom, or what the ransom demand was, because they couldn't pay a ransom under this bill. This bill also creates a prohibition on paying a ransom. The Florida House, and it looks like the whole legislature is taking a stand against what they're saying, wanting to take a stand against terrorists. We're not going to negotiate with them and pay them a ransom. And again, the last part is that they have to have a statement requesting or declining assistance to the Cybersecurity Operations Center under the Florida Digital Service and the FDLE Cybercrime Office. These while this is a mandate, there is a lot of money in the state budget right now. Over $70 million specifically for this local government training and standards, but also another $100 million that the state is setting aside to set up this framework with the University of South Florida and Cyber Florida, who's taking the lead on the academic side here in Florida. This is something that we did weigh in support in committee. There's a lot of support for local governments included in the bill and in the budget. And it will also provide an additional responsibility to the Florida Cybersecurity Advisory Council, which is of course headed up by Lieutenant Governor Nunez, to advise counties and municipalities on cybersecurity, including cyber threats, trends, and best practices. So the state is taking a more active role in including local governments in its cyber approach. The weakest link of the system could be a small city or a county or a state agency. So we want to make sure that all aspects of our infrastructure network that guard our critical infrastructure are on the same level playing field and have the same types of standards. So we will be watching that one. The Senate Bill 1670 by Senator Hudson got a delete all this morning that matches the House bill. So we will be looking towards conference to see if the money in the Senate, which was unfortunately non-existent, we won't want to see that money come up to the level of the House that has prioritized this issue. And that is my one big thing for this week, Bob.
Jeff, are you saying that we have a chance for the very rarely seen funded mandate,
right,
albeit with grants?
Right. So, and they're using grant money through the state share of the American Rescue Plan. So this is money coming from the feds, and of course that money can the Biden bucks, Santa's dollars, whatever you want to call it, that could be used as an allowable expense under the state or local fiscal recovery share that we've all received.
Can't remember the last time I saw one of those.
Okay. We've gotten through the rundown. We've gotten through one big thing. Got a couple of announcements this week. Of course, it was Hillsborough County Day. We had the pirate ship, Gasparilla folks up, tossing Cubans out to the good people.
Ybor City type Cuban sandwiches with a little bit of salami.
Yeah, the original Cuban sandwich.
That's correct.
And it was also FAMU Day at the Capitol. I know we had some Rattler love in the office here this week. But of course, we're winding things down. The legislature's winding things down. Committees are wrapping up. We still don't have budget allocations per silo, so there's no budget conference this weekend. So we will stay tuned on that front. What else, Eddie, what else should we expect as we go down the last 2 weeks here?
Well, we're looking forward to budget discussions, as next week is the 8th week, and next weekend we can expect to be loaded with budget conference. So budget time is here, and
Get your rest.
Are going to be get your rest this weekend.
Eat your
because
Wheaties.
next weekend we're going to be up and about for long times. And of course, as always, we're going to have a lot of downtime as well as we wait for the 5-minute committees and the discussion in between.
And we've got to make sure Bob doesn't have any balls to juggle in that downtime. I know he's going to find a way to fill it with.
Hey, got to keep one in the air. Only rule for juggling, one's always got to be in the air. Feels like the last 2 weeks when you're juggling, because you never know from out of thin air what new issue is going to come up. Pop up as an amendment. Everything that was too good to be filed in the bill or amended in the committee shows up in those last 2 weeks on the floor.
Right, so stay close to your phones. Look for those amendments. I know we will be. Our whole team, the analysts will be too. And Bob, as always, we always wrap this up with a quote of the week. What do we got?
All right, this week it's going to be from the gambler, Mr. Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and always know when to run.
And with that, that's it for this week's edition of FACish. We'll see you next week. FAC out.